Welcome everyone to Radicalized, Truth Survives. We are a show about disinformation. My name is Heidi Cuda. I'm here with Jim Stewartson, Fidelity, and Sean Connor. We are a quartet that does the best we can to try to stop fascism, because that is really what we are finding the disinformation world is, pushing people toward. And with that said, we have a very, very special guest, the return of Paul Mason, who wrote the book, How to Stop Fascism. And he actually is somebody who is working very hard globally. He's a veteran journalist who's gone independent and is networked throughout the world, trying to work with people to move away from authoritarianism toward liberal democracies, which we thought was going to be a foregone conclusion. And as we've learned in the last few years, we all got to work for it. And that's what we're doing here at RadPod. And without further ado, let's get into Frontloaded.
Hey.
Frontloaded.
All right, just 3 quick hits from me before we move along. Number 1, a lot of dead oligarchs are turning up. And part of the reason I love these 4 guys is we all speak oligarchy. Like, we know the language, we watch the players, we are very aware of the 5th column in America and the connections to some of the Russian thug oligarchs. And they're turning up dead in, odd situations, inordinate numbers. So I'm just giving you guys a little bit of a teaser. I have interviewed our money laundering expert, our financial expert, Martin Shield, former IRS criminal investigator. And he's given me some really great insights, and some of it's speculative, but 100 years ago, 93 years ago, millionaires were jumping out of windows when the stock market tanked and they were in debt, and they went from, they were going to go back from riches to rags. And he thinks that there may be some of this afoot. He came on our show and talked about the sanctions that needed to happen in order to, be punitive toward Putin and his aggression. Those sanctions have happened, and now oligarchs are turning up dead. So I'm doing a fat thread on that. It'll be available to read by tomorrow at Heidi_Cuda at Twitter. So look for that. The second item I wanted to point out is I teased on Radpod and Chill that my story on the industrial outrage complex would be running in Byline Times. That's actually going to be running Tuesday, which will be tomorrow by this time view. So please check that out, because we have to pay attention to what is happening in many of the states throughout America that are becoming these, authoritarian labs. I don't think there's any better way to say it. And now, for just a faux, no, I don't want to be terrible, just a quick hit for me, guys, on, we just learned that Orrin Hatch passed away. He was the longest, one of the longest serving politicians in our country, if not the longest, at his level as a senator. And I just noticed in the eulogies for him, they did not include the work that he did to get supplements like ephedra on the market, which ended up harming and killing many people. And his son, who is a lobbyist, ended up profiting in the millions. And I bring that up because it's a personal story for me. After I had my 2nd child, I couldn't lose that weight. I went to a health food store. They sold me some shites with ephedra in it. It almost took me out. I went to my boss, who I was working in broadcast news at the time, Jackie Spear, and I, in an 11-part series, got that crap off the market with Orrin Hatch fighting us the whole way. There's me and Jackie back in the day. I love that woman so much.
Do you have the same kind of glasses? Those are just pink tinted?
Yeah, those are pink tinted, and when I went out into, I still have those. When I went outside, they would turn purple, and I've got my custom Pennywise belt, my favorite punk band.
Oh, it is? Oh, it is Pennywise.
I know, I made that custom Pennywise. But we worked really hard with also then Senator Harry Reid to get that stuff off the market, and Orrin Hatch fought it, and then a baseball player died ramping up, coverage of it, and then he, then he basically had to admit that this was causing harms. But I bring this up because we lost Bob Dole, who was eulogized, and they didn't talk about his work with Oleg Deripaska. And I think that it's very important that we don't forget, the fact that, Orrin Hatch was, one of the most, proponents against abortion, and really helped push us back into the dark ages there. So I don't like to speak ill of the dead, but I do think that the reporters have to stop letting us down, and they have to do a better job of pointing out.
Sometimes the dead deserve it, though.
Well, I didn't corny out for Rush Limbaugh. So, but anyway, so that's front loaded. I just wanted to get those few things out there. So let's move on to word phrase of the week.
What you got there? High five.
So our word phrase of the week this week is lawfare. And what is lawfare, you may ask? Well, lawfare is the weaponization of the judicial process to intimidate, bankrupt, or silence your opponents. That is lawfare.
Well done.
Why is that important? Let's talk about why that's important. As you may have seen recently, Devin Nunes was finally told, you got to stop suing CNN, bud.
You can't. Yep.
Yeah. You look at Michael Flynn, who tried to silence CNN when they reported on his family being part of QAnon. Jim?
Can I say something about that?
Sure, bud.
My tweets were in that lawsuit.
Yeah, they were. I remember that. Yeah.
And
my
that was
tweets, my accurate as fuck tweets about how the Flynn family are a pack, quote unquote, a pack of propagandists. Those were true. All of those things were true. And it's also true that the Flynn family is all in QAnon because they invented that shit. I just said it.
By the way, the connecting network note I have between Devin Nunes and Michael Flynn is that lawyer Stephen Biss.
That's a lot of quotes around lawyer. There's so many quotes.
But on a serious note,
like a flock of quotes.
On a serious note,
Stephen Biss.
Yeah, on a serious note, something that I have noticed that is occurring is there is a small legal blog out of New Zealand that is, Sergey Grishin, a man who I have a lot of anger in my heart towards, he is actually suing a law blog, a very small independent journalist blog, to find out who gave them information, and he is using lawfare against this blog to intimidate his opponents.
So let me tie this around. So Stephen S. Biss, guess who he's suing now?
A cow.
And on behalf of whom? It's amazing.
An animal.
But the First Amendment Praetorians, Mike Flynn's personal guard, are suing Seth Abramson, the guy who's been writing books about Russiagate for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And tweeting the shit out of him. And, whatever you think of Seth, that dude has brought out some serious ass facts onto the table. And he is currently getting sued by the First Amendment Praetorians because of his coverage about the Willard Hotel.
Oh my God. Well,
the same guy.
Let's look at one of the biggest ones.
Put me
right?
in the lawsuit, by the way. The same guy.
Right.
Same guy.
Let's look at one of the biggest ones: Aaron Banks and Carol Cadwalder.
Yeah.
Right. This is intimidation by a millionaire who has apparently ties to Russian oligarchs, spreading money by his own admission. And yet, does he sue Carol's paper? No. He doesn't even sue TEDx. He sues Carol. This is personal. This is lawfare.
Yeah, it's designed to harm people, right? It's using a system that's supposed to protect people to harm them. That is what fascists do.
And we are still waiting for a ruling in that, and it's been now, what, 4 or 5 months? I think that was happening back in January. It's been years for her. So,
And what went along with that lawfare? The shitload of coordinated, targeted harassment and trolling, right?
yes,
Yep.
and she
It's all part of the
admits to
same
how
thing.
much psychological pain it's caused, not only financial, but true pain. And we just had a very brilliant conversation in our second breaking news special with Dr. Charles Creel, who's going to show us what is happening in laws that are ramping up to actually deal with online harms. And as he said, truthfully, we need to deal with bullies like we do in the real world. And so this is something that we're really excited about. So look for that later in the week. And it was interesting that Charles really wanted to talk about misogyny as well, because being on the receiving end as a reporter, an independent reporter on toxic misogyny, and him tying that together with terrorism felt really fucking good. It feels so good when you have a witness to these things that follow you around. And I want to point out one more thing. Jason Stanley, who is an incredible expert on authoritarianism and fascism and has written books about this subject, admitted that a trolling campaign that's been going on against him is hurting him. He admitted that he's in distress and pain over it. And I'm very, very grateful that he did that. He almost apologized afterwards for doing that. And I think it's very important that we actually understand and people are willing to come forward and say, this hurts me, this is causing me pain, this is something that I'm distressed about, because we can't just keep brushing off online harms, domestic terrorism, single purpose hate accounts, and make that the norm in life. It can't be. So
I struggle with that all the time, right? Like, do I, how much, like, do I tell them that they've succeeded, right? Because their goal is exactly that. Their goal is to tear you down psychologically, to harm you, to hurt you. And so, there is the risk of saying, you're hurting me, of them going, awesome, let's do more of that. We did it. Like, let's go.
I would offer the thought, Jim, that what they really need to be worried about is the fucking payback that's going to come for them, because it will.
Whether it's legal, karmic, whatever it is. But Jim, obviously you're dangerous to them, and the work that you do is, or you would not have a targeted ongoing campaign. Even being off of Twitter, they continue. And also, if your tweets are being included in lawsuits, then that is further evidence of the importance and relevancy of your work. So I'm glad that despite it all, you continue to do what you do. So more of that, please. And with that, I say we move on to why it matters, yo.
Let's do it.
Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Why high fidelity?
I mean, Sean does not have time to do this type of production because he's so busy, and I see it and I'm like, it's brilliant. I love it.
The little Elon in the background of that last one.
I saw it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Okay,
oh my God.
Good.
Elon Musk is a fucking problem. Oh, got that out. Sorry. So let's talk about why it matters. First thing we're going to talk about is lies, death, and Wagner. And this story actually relates to a city called Moura, M-O-U-R-A, in Mali. And as you may or may not know, if you are a regular watcher of our show, Mali underwent a junta, a military takeover of their government just a few years back. And now they have been working with the Russian mercenaries, Wagner. However, in Moura, there are reports that 300 to 500 people were systematically executed in an atrocity.
Jesus.
And the United Nations has, they have inspectors on the ground, and they're like, hey, Malian government, let us go into Moura and investigate. And the Malian government has denied them. However, at the same time, French intelligence has published satellite photos of Mora showing that Caucasian individuals, apparently tied to Wagner, are working with Malian troops to set up a fake French atrocity. In other words, they are hoping to blame the slaughter of 300 to 500 innocent civilians on the French government, while in actuality, it was Wagner and Malian troops who did so.
Well, thank you for bringing us that news. I don't think anyone else covers it the way you do, so I'm very grateful to you. High five.
Thanks. Why it matters, just so we're on the same page here. Why it matters is because Wagner is also in Ukraine, and they are committing war crimes and atrocities in Ukraine, and they're doing this around the globe. And I don't know what it's going to take to get the United States government and the EU to stomp down on Wagner. You know, Prigozhin was just hit with new sanctions, but I don't think it's enough. All right.
Clearly.
So moving on.
It's
Clearly.
always what's, it's what Charles Creel talked about, and what we often talk about. It's often what's legal that's still fucking harmful. So that's going to be a new thing that we promote, legal but harmful. And thank God.
Speaking of Wagner, legal and harmful, Eric Prince comes to mind.
Oh yeah, he does.
Because Blackwater was theoretically legal.
So was leaded gasoline.
Yes, it was.
Right. Which the headline a few weeks ago showed that the reason we're all kind of, brain dead is because of that, and the headline went nowhere.
800 million IQ points lost. Yeah, apparently. Anyway,
Well,
go ahead.
we're
Anyway.
fighting for the IQ points to stage a comeback here.
Yeah.
So, oh my God, I'm so excited about our interview with Paul Mason again, and just all the work that we're doing. It fills my heart because I step out of our show, and aside from Byline Times and Ruth Ben-Ghiat's, hour every week, I step out into a world that I feel like an alien in. They don't see what we see, so I'm grateful to be in these boxes with you right now, pushing out this very important stuff. Okay, high five, numero dos.
Numero dos is Russia's on fire, yo. What's been going on in Russia? Well, strangely, the largest chemical manufacturing plant in Russia and one of their military manufacturing plants both caught on fire within 24 hours of each other. Not only that, but at least 5 different what they call conscription offices, which are basically military recruiting offices, have burned to the ground, including all of their records and computers. So apparently Russia might be having a little bit of a domestic insurgency problem with people burning down their recruiting offices. And the third reason Russia's on fire is because right now, as we speak, double the acreage that burned last year is currently on fire in Siberia, and no one is talking about this. And this is incredibly dangerous because the Siberian tundra holds back a ton of methane. And methane is a greenhouse gas, which contributes to global warming.
Yeah.
Why is this dangerous? If the tundra unfreezes, the tundra burns, all that methane is released, climate change advances. And who does that benefit? Well, Russia actually has a plan in which they hope all the people of India move to Siberia during global warming to farm what is now farmland in Siberia. Russia's planning for this, and no one's doing anything about it.
If anybody's ever seen those giant sinkholes in Siberia, those giant fucking holes.
So
those
creepy.
are just giant methane like pipes.
Bubbles. Yeah.
They literally they're pipes where methane comes out all day long, just into the atmosphere. And the more fucking Siberia burns, the more of those there are going to be. And the more methane that goes in the atmosphere, the more it gets heated up and the more fucking sinkholes there are. So guess what happens? We turn into Venus.
Right. And speaking of sinkholes, I'm reflecting back on a choice America had in 2000, where we had a choice between an environmentalist and a fossil fuelist. And we got the fossil fuelist thanks to Roger Stone and the Brooks Brothers riot and some bullshit in Florida, speaking of sinkholes. And we were supposed to be progressing on matters of climate change and climate justice, and we didn't. We regressed. We had war. War is shit for the environment. What are we in right now? Another fossil fuel, inspired war, and war is shit for the environment, and we keep on regressing rather than progressing. So I hope that we do a lot more reporting on this show on disinformation as it relates to those trying to stop all conversations of Green New Deals and climate change, because that's what we need to be about. Well done again, Hi-Fi. Well done.
Thanks. All right. Final story today is going to be, it's time to take tech to task. Say that 5 times fast. But what this story is about is the EU is passing both the DMA, which is the Digital Marketplace Act, and the DSA, which is the Digital Services Act. And both of these sets of laws are intended to take large tech monopolies to task. They will now have to explain how their algorithms work. They have to open source how their manipulations of people work. They have to open source data about their platforms to researchers, which, if you know anything about Facebook and Twitter in the past, they have been very, very, very tight-fisted with the data they allow research to have access to. The other law that is going to be passing very, very shortly is going to be the OSB, or Online Safety Bill. And we just did a quick breaking news with Dr. Charles Creel about it. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it seems as if the most severe penalty, which is prison time for executives whose platforms cause harm, be it data or social media, that is looked to be taken out of the bill, which is unfortunate, because the only way to get these people to understand that they are causing harm, real life, white collar crime harm, is to threaten them with prison.
Yes, but it is a step in the right direction. And when that does get attached, right, it has to be attached to something. So it's moving in that direction, which is very, very.
And here's the real reason why it matters. The UK is doing this. The EU is doing this. Everyone sees it. As a matter of fact, President Barack Obama just gave a speech recently where he said social media was a cesspool designed to destroy democracy, right? And how many laws do we have pending in the United States to bring these tech companies to heel?
None. Which gets to the point of the hypocrisy of the right wing and the GOP. It's all the censored by tech, blah blah blah. And then talking about Obama's speech, they said, "Look, there's Obama just wanting to cancel it. All else wanting to cancel everything, wanting to cancel big tech, and
Right. Do you remember the abuse and the memes that his wife got
Jesus, yes,
for 8 fucking years? Yeah. And now we've learned a lot of that, not necessarily domestic, much of it coming from, because it continued, of course, on into the ramping up of our great information war of 2016. Thank you so much for that. And what's really exciting is this is an incredible segue to have a brilliant explainer from Connor during brief legal briefs on Marjorie Taylor Greene and the hearing that just took place.
That's right.
Brief legal briefs.
All right. It's going to be maybe a little longer briefs today, but I think it'll be worth it, because if you watched as I did, I'm sure you were met with the kind of giddy excitement and hope, and then you're quickly met with a confusion, and followed by a despair, followed by a sort of a longing for a rules sheet as to what the hell is going on. Because guys, there's never been a hearing like this, I don't think, ever. So the provision went in place, and it has never really been litigated. So here we are in Georgia in what looked to be like, a stock room. Somebody's back. I mean, obviously it wasn't a trial. It wasn't a courtroom. It did have, some accoutrement, but that was one of the strangest parts, was seeing the gallery there, the audience. Well, first of all, them clapping as Marjorie Taylor Greene comes into the room, which was absurdist. And then
I
I was
want to
one.
stop
Pedophile
for
Matt
1 second
Gates.
and establish your bona fides. If this
Oh.
is the first time somebody ever watches today, I
Sure.
want them to know that Sean runs a litigation support
Yes.
firm with his wife. So this is his work. This is what he does.
That's right.
And what he saw was this epic
That's right.
failure of
So
preparation.
specifically, we have a litigation support firm, and I've worked with lawyers doing research and analysis for them for over 15 years now. My wife has a PhD in cellular and molecular biology. She helps attorneys with causation in sort of cancer or chemical cases, or to the Havner standard in Texas. So, we get hired to help attorneys or firms build out arguments for cases or develop discovery strategy. And then I specifically, one of my most fun parts of my job, which is exciting, is I'm a trial technician, which means I'm the guy that does all the video, obviously, and the editing. I do demonstrative design. If they need a timeline or a chart to be presented in front of the jury, I'll do that. And then I handle all of the presentation materials for all the exhibits that go up, all of those videos that were played. I would edit those and put them on the screen, which is one of the reasons I was so frustrated with with the entire endeavor, was because either they didn't have trial techs in there, or and I'm not going to blame anybody. No one really went ahead of time and saw what the room looked like. You can do you can do things right before you go to trial. You always talk to their IT person. And so I'll just show you a little bit here of the court and give you some of my perspective on it from that angle, because maybe it'll shed some insight, maybe not.
Thank you.
We could do this now. I understand there's an IT issue that requires a pause. Should we take?
So first of all, guys, any IT issue they think you can solve in 2 minutes, anything, no matter what it is. Watch, I bet they say 2 minutes.
How long do we need? 2 minutes? All right.
Every time, every attorney, every judge thinks any IT issue can be solved in 2 minutes.
Be patient. Stop.
All right, see this guy right here? That's what I would typically be doing. Is trying to, what the hell's going on? What the hell's going on? And then eventually they're like, we got to pause. So one of my first cases in federal court was in front of a judge who was appointed by Ronald Reagan. This is a big mass tort case. My first, time trial teching, and I fucked up so horribly. You get really nervous and you can't even figure out the routing of a video. I couldn't get this video to play for one of the depositions, and I just couldn't figure it out. My brain went numb, and the judge said, son, if you can't get your act together, we're gonna have to call a recess. And I don't think that your counselors would, I think they'll have something to say to you about that when you waste everybody's time. And so my solution to that was just to get up and fucking run. Like I thought, just run out the door. They can't get you. I'll just run out, and you won't have to deal with it. That was the solution in my head.
How'd that work?
I didn't run. Obviously, I sat there and took my licks. But I'm in the federal record for that case. It's hilarious. I'm in the record actually. So, but it does get nerve wracking up there, obviously, because it's you got to perform. You got to perform now. Obviously, there's some performance issues here. But what I was telling Heidi was, if he would have called ahead and you would have set this room up, there's only the screen over here on the right. That's it. And, the guy complains constantly, I can't see it. The attorney, right? The attorney he objects, and then he complains that he can't see it, even though, what the fuck? It doesn't matter to you. Anyway, what we would have done, what I've done tons of times, is I would have put a screen over here and brought a separate projector in. So you have a screen and a projector on this side, obviously. Much more easy for this side to read, and you can see it. So little things like that can make a huge difference in the presentation of material. Of course, no one knew what the hell this hearing was. This was basically like a bona fide. This was basically like a deposition. This wasn't a trial. It wasn't. Everybody kept referring to it as that, but it had the rules of a trial. But it was really a depo, right? Because she said I don't know 10,000 times, whatever. That's something that you handle in a deposition. And then when you get her in the actual court, and you're actually in trial presenting her, then you can say, do you remember now, Miss Green? You said you didn't know. You said you didn't remember in your deposition 2 months ago. Did you have time to refresh your memory?
Yeah.
So that's what this was basically a glorified deposition. And that's why it was so frustrating, because it has the trappings of a more, sophisticated trial atmosphere, but it really wasn't, and that's why it was so unfulfilling, I think, probably for everyone involved.
It did seem like she lied under oath.
She did. Oh, yeah, she totally perjured herself. But so what? To what end? Okay, so this wasn't a criminal proceeding. This wasn't a civil proceeding. What was it? This was an administrative proceeding. What does that mean? That means that our judge here, who, by the way, I did a little looking into, a very interesting guy, he would have to refer her for censure, right, to Raffensperger. And then he would take it up from there. And the only thing that would really happen would be a censure. I mean, perjuring yourself in this arena, in this environment, isn't that big of a deal, unfortunately,
So, can you take away the screen for a second?
Yeah, sorry.
Echo. So all I wanted to say is that let's just quickly tell our viewers why this was so important. It was unfulfilling. It was sloppy. It was maybe a joke, but it was fucking important.
Very important. It's very important because it shows that there are individuals, there are organizations that are going to attempt to hold people accountable, right? And that's one of the things that the Democrats have been horrible, progressives have been terrible at for all time immemorial, right? It showed that that we're going to look at this, right? These are the options that we have given to us, and we're going to take a shot at it, And to hear them scream and cry and we've been done wrong, even though Marjorie Taylor Greene proposed what was it? It was after Black Lives Matter. She tried to file a bill to get someone kicked out of the House. I forgot who it was. So they've done the same. She'd already tried. She tried to do this earlier. Didn't work.
They're trying to keep her off the ballot because she, backed a fucking insurrection. It's as simple
100%.
as that, right?
100%. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so it's not unconstitutional. It's right in the Constitution. It hasn't been looked at, thank God, for since 1860. So this is the first time that it has ever risen to this level.
Wow.
Yeah. So I have to tell you guys real quick on this judge, because if you were like, man, this guy's really loose with his court, like I was, well, it's because he's a very kind of chill guy. He's a retired attorney. He's been a tax attorney for 30 years. I put this together, but so check this out. He's a composer and he's a singer. He's like a very well accomplished musician and singer, which is interesting. But more interesting than anything is that this guy collects Japanese vases, particularly Japanese Meijing period between 1868 and 1912. So he collects these little bird vases from Japan and has over 500 of these things. It's amazing.
They're quite beautiful. When you showed me that, I looked them up. I'm a birder, and I just thought, wow, that is incredible taste.
So
they're lovely.
So someone who has his background as a tax attorney, who is a musician, and a Japanese art enthusiast, I don't think is going to give the most strict, thought to the First Amendment. I'm saying I don't think there's not a chance he's going to refer this on. I think it dies here. I think it dies online. But it's the first look at it, and we gave it a shot. I think it was worth the time. It was worth the effort.
Yeah, I always wonder in these things, the whole thing was so fucking incompetent.
Exactly.
That you almost think okay, was that even really an effort? Because sure, I guess the old college try and everything. But if you're going to get up there and like you said, just be completely unprepared in every possible way to argue your case, to have the great presentation, any of it, did you really make an effort, or did you actually just kind of close down a pathway that might otherwise work?
That's a good question.
That is the question.
And part of the difficulty was that there was no discovery. There was none of that happened as you would find in a typical litigation cycle. So that's why they were fumbling around with the exhibits, and still that doesn't account for some of that. But that did account for the judge, right, being very loose, letting this guy object. So I looked through the C-SPAN. There was only one time that the defense attorney didn't object. There's only one time that the plaintiff's attorney got 4 questions in a row. That's it. Every other time it was an objection after every single thing he said.
Yeah, it was clear it was clear, just straight up interference. And any good judge is going to be like, listen, you keep doing that, I'm gonna fucking kick you
Exactly.
out, and you're not
Yeah.
gonna like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, the judge was way loose. And then, I mean, even the stuff that Marjorie Taylor Greene was saying, like, you would never get away with that. Like when she said,
Right.
when she told him that he has more conspiracy theories than QAnon, and
Yeah.
that you don't show me CNN as an exhibit. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Who the fuck?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and then
Yeah.
she said right after that, I never said I believe in QAnon.
Yeah.
totally. But that kind of like
Talking
that,
about perjury.
that kind of like, you
Perjury,
know,
Taylor Green.
Speaking of lying about QAnon and Mike Flynn,
Yeah.
but we're going to come back to that in
When you're on,
to
buddy.
that trial
And
briefly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Jim Stewartson's Hellscape. Oh, fuck.
All right.
You
So
on.
let us escape into some hell, shall we?
Yeah.
All right. So over the last couple of weeks now, since just after actually our last show, I've been working very closely with Gal Suburban from Twitter, Gal_Suburban. Major shout out on a piece. Can you just throw up that graphic real quick?
Yes, I can.
Called "The Insurrection Was Plan B," and
Yeah.
so we've gotten two parts of it now. And the first part is relevant to my little sort of video thread that I'm about to do. So, do we have that graphic?
Yeah, here you go. This is you and Gal, right?
Yeah.
So this was-
Yeah. So, I'll just talk over this for a sec.
All right.
So USAID is a really important agency that people don't really know about. $50 billion budget, yada yada. Turns out it was a major part of the original plan to overturn the election. And this is incredibly important for everybody to get, right? Like in terms of the January 6th committee, everybody else. The insurrection wasn't the first plan. It was not like they weren't originally like going to set out to just throw a bunch of Proud Boys at the Capitol. They had a legal and constitutional, kind of plan that involved an executive order, specifically Executive Order 13848, which Trump had set up in 2018, right before the 2018 midterms. And that executive order said that after every presidential election, within 45 days, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence has to issue a report about foreign interference. Very important. Foreign interference in the election, the Office of Director of National Intelligence. And the basic idea was that that report was going to come out. It was going to say that there was foreign interference by China and Italy and Venezuela and a bunch of other bullshit, like made up stuff like that.
Right.
And then Flynn was going to basically rerun the elections using USAID, which is the part that people don't get. Literally using the mechanism of the government, which is for international development inside the United States.
Right.
Like, I need everyone to fucking grasp that shit. Like, for real, they were doing this. Now, let's go to the next video real quick, and I'll show you why. This was the Flynn one.
The Flynn video? Okay.
Or it's a tweet. It's Gal's tweet with the clip of Flynn.
It's he's wearing the red sweater.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. All right.
So we have clear evidence of a foreign interference, which is all the president's executive order describes. That's the executive order from 2018. He reinstituted it in 2019. He reinstituted it again in 2020. And so we are essentially in a national emergency that the president has already declared. He just has to decide whether to execute some of those procedures that are well within his authority. So we have foreign interference from China. We have foreign interference from Serbia. We have foreign interference from Italy, from Spain, from Germany. And then on the 30th of October, 2020, so a couple of days before the 3rd of November election, and then on the 3rd of November, the FBI and CISA, which is that guy Krebs, right? Krebs, who came out and said there's no foreign interference at all about a week after the election.
Jesus Christ, this man.
So let's be clear about what that was. That was January 5th. That was the day before the insurrection.
Wow.
Flint on InfoWars with, Sandy Hook denier and Nazi Alex Jones, the day before the insurrection, talking about that executive order that Gal pointed me to. And so it's really important right there. He's still trying to pressure Trump to put Plan A into place. Mm-hmm. So what happened was the DNI report actually came through, and the intelligence community didn't cooperate, and they said, no, that's bullshit. The Chinese didn't do anything. It was Russia. And so Trump actually suppressed that. And so they made up all these other stories in order to try and keep Plan A in place. And when it didn't happen, when the ODNI report didn't happen, the next day, December 19th, is when Trump tweeted out wild protest in DC. Mm. So that's what happened. Now, let's bring it back around real quick to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Mm-hmm. Let's play the next one.
Which is the next one?
The
trial?
The lawyer.
The lawyer, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So remember the name of our piece.
What was going to happen
Plan B.
when all the lawful demonstrations happened and all the objections on the floor of the House were heard, and as everyone knew, they were futile. The votes were there to certify the election of Joe Biden. There was a Plan B, and Plan B was violence at the Capitol. Plan B was to physically enter the Capitol illegally, not on a tourist tour, busting in the windows and doors, as you saw in that video, injuring and ultimately causing the deaths of law enforcement, to block the certification of Joe Biden as the winner of the 2020 election. That's what Plan B was.
All right. So,
Wow.
I don't know if dude read our piece or not, but yeah, that's exactly true. It was Plan B, but they had fucking Plan B. They were ready because and they knew it was going to potentially come to that. They decapitated the entire Pentagon and put a bunch of Mike Flynn people in the Pentagon after the election for two reasons. One is so that they could try and administer Plan A, and if not, they could enable Plan B, which is exactly what they did.
Jesus Christ.
So,
can we talk about Ezra Cohen Watnick going to Italy?
Yeah, I was thinking
not
now, but I mean, it is important to know that part. So much evidence.
Ezra Cohen Watnick, he's gonna get some attention, but not right this second, because I want to bring attention to somebody else.
Beans.
In Flynn's orbit. And this is a person named Tracy Diaz. And why this comes around is because in investigating this story, right? Specifically the meeting on December 18th, where that crazy ass meeting in the White House everyone remembers with Sidney Powell and Mike Flynn and Patrick Byrne and all those people. I was looking into that, and I ran into this interview with Tracy Diaz and Patrick Byrne, and I have a big old, a lot of stuff coming out on Ms. Diaz, but I wanted to sort of tease that and tie it back into what we were just talking about.
Thank you.
Tracy Diaz was on the Ron Paul campaign way back. She started in Occupy like everybody else in 2010, and then went to Ron Paul. Ron Paul, two things you need to know about Ron Paul. Vladimir Putin's favorite person, favorite presidential candidate, including Jill Stein, of anyone. And Ron Paul was almost entirely financed by Peter fucking Thiel.
Wow.
And that's going to become important. So anyway, she starts there with that whole thing, and Stuart Rhodes gets involved, plus a guy who just got indicted for bringing Russian money into the 2016 campaign, named Jesse Benton. We'll get to him.
Yep.
Oh boy.
Anyway, Tracy Diaz also ran Q. She ran Q from November until August-ish of 2018, November of 2017 to August of 2018. And this video is going to show you sort of the later stages of Ms. Diaz, who works, by the way, for Mike Flynn, and is on the board of directors of his CNP organization, America's Future. Jeez. So let's see a little Tracy Diaz.
Co-owner from West Virginia.
She's telling the truth.
There's a photograph of you with Robert David Steele. Yes. Standing under a portrait of, is it Theodore Roosevelt?
Jerome Corsi.
The posts from yesterday. Now we went through, and that pen is actually the pen that's on the desk is actually on Obama's old Camp David desk.
Jerome Corsi.
That's what we did.
Yeah, that's the
CNP.
That's the Laurel desk that's in the. It's the one that Obama used, and apparently Trump is also using at Camp David. That's the desktop at Camp David,
right.
And that picture had to have been taken by somebody who was there with President Trump. His pen on the desk, and that pretty much authenticates that, again, QAnon is very close to Donald Trump and present at some of these really important inner circle White House meetings.
Yeah, it was fantastic to see, and just another validation out of all the validation.
Look, obviously it's the people versus the machine at this point, and that's very clear. I really hope that President Trump understands just how many of us are fighting this battle out here on the ground to keep this country, sovereign, for lack of a better word.
Well, you can expect, I think Biden is going to break our sovereignty. I think I know what his plan is. It involves the UN, and Americans should arm. If Biden comes in, you should arm. And the day that he does anything like invites the UN in, is the day we start revolution.
I've never seen as many people, Patrick, get themselves to DC as the past month over and over again. And we need to do it times 60. Like, there needs to be more people. And if you can't get to DC for some odd reason, do it in your own freaking capital. Do it. Just do it. Stop making excuses. If you don't do it, we will lose.
Yeah, that's right. If you don't overthrow democracy, you will lose. That's exactly what she said.
Lost.
And
that's treason, right?
All of that's fucking treason. All of it is. It's all literal warfare against the United States of America.
Yes, it is. And just seeing Jerome Corsi again and being triggered by all that. We've all done so much reporting around this, and to think that we are not further along in the judicial process is causing me grave agony.
Well, Jerome Corsi came up during 2016. This was him literally running the QLARP. Does everyone understand this? QAnon, like fucking Jerome Corsi, CNP, Roger Stone guy, running Q, Tracy Diaz, who currently is Mike Flynn's employee and was doing Russian ops for 10 years before that. Python.
And isn't there already an article out about Tracy Diaz being artificially amplified by Russians from the Internet Research Agency?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, starting in April of 2017. Oh, that was
Yeah.
way before that.
You can actually go through all that data and see every single tweet. Yeah, I think it's
by the way,
graphic.
number one fan and live vlogger of Goosifer 2 was Tracy Beans Diaz. And she basically live blogged Pizzagate starting from Goosifer releasing the emails all the way through finding the Podesta email about spirit cooking all the way through to Free Assange right now. It's all the same shit and the same people doing the same Russian ops. That is my Hellscape.
Oh my gosh, Paul Mason, we are so happy to have you back. I'm just going to do a quick intro for our viewers, and then I'll ask you to do the same. Our show is a show that at its core is about how to stop fascism, because that's what a show that investigates disinformation in 2022 is truly about. You wrote the book on that. You're a playwright. You've written many books. My favorite part of your story is the part where you left network news because you were shackled to do this sort of neutral thing, which is nothing but a death knell for democracy, in my opinion. I believe journalists must be biased, and I believe that bias must be truth. And that is my intro to Paul Mason.
Well, thank you, Heidi. And the other reason I left is because you can have more fun while you're telling the real and full truth. That's the bottom line of it. So many of my colleagues still in there, plugging away, doing really good work, even now in Ukraine and in France today, covering the Macron Le Pen election. But at the end of tonight, they'll go to the bar knowing that they've said, on the one hand, Macron, on the other hand, fascist Le Pen. And I just didn't want to do that anymore. So thank you. And thanks for having me on again.
We are still very profoundly moved from your last visit when we learned the holes in our Constitution where, one gives you the right to say you're going to overthrow the government, and two allows you to actually do it. And we are still profoundly shaken to the core for that. And we're seeing that in real time. So quickly, you have been to Ukraine. You are one of our friends who actually went right there during the kinetic phase of this portion of Putin's war of annihilation. Tell us what you saw and what our viewers should know.
Well, for context, I was there until exactly 36 hours before the kinetic phase when my government told me to get out ASAP, because I wasn't there as a journalist. I was there with a left delegation of lawmakers and trade union leaders, including the leaders of the railway and miners union from Britain, and two senior lawmakers and me and a couple of left academics were there for the one purpose to take out of the hands of elite politicians the ownership of the connection between our country and Ukraine. Because, I wanted many people here on the left in Britain are in full solidarity, of course, with Ukraine. And we knew it was going to happen. Something was going to happen. But we said, look, it's so frustrating to see conservative politicians, many of whom have taken money, millions of pounds indeed, in donations from Russian oligarchs, owning the task of communicating. And we were told by our equivalent of the State Department, you're not allowed to go. So we went. First thing is to say, our mission was to talk to trade unionists, human rights defenders, feminist groups, and the left. And there is a left in Ukraine, contrary to what we hear on the disinformation networks of the pro-Putin left. There is a left in Ukraine that is fully internationalist, fully plugged into the same agenda that we're plugged into. And we met them, we had pizza with them, and we drank 7-Up with them. And they were all the kind of young 20, 30-somethings that are studying PhDs in all kinds of stuff. And those same people, 50-something days later, are in uniforms clutching AK-47s in a trench. And so we were mightily glad that we saw them then. We saw the trade union movement. I was in the office of an independent trade union in Kiev, which organizes miners and railway workers. And it was the morning that the sequence went like this. Putin claimed the Donbass, the two breakaway republics, rolled tanks into there 2 days before the war started. So we already knew something was going on. Their members in that region were saying, look, many of them fled those breakaway Russian-controlled republics. because the union was banned. The activists in the union were kidnapped, tortured, and a couple of cases killed. The human rights workers we met had been working for 8 years with victims of torture, victims of rape, victims of kidnap and disappearance. And what they said to us is, on the other side of the border, there is no operation. You cannot have an independent trade union in Putin's Russia or in the Donbass breakaway republics. We cannot have human rights investigations. And so on that morning, what they were saying, and these were no friends of Volodymyr Zelensky, these were no friends of neoliberalism. They said, what our action today is to go home and pick up our guns and go to the front. And so, yeah, and the end of the story is we had a great time documenting that. We had some access and some meetings with the Ukrainian government, and I was able to put to them criticism, which we may come to, about stuff like the Azov battalion. But in the end, it came to an abrupt halt. I was sitting in the hotel lobby, and as a journalist, you're used to what we call Peli cases, which are black plastic cases, big heavy black plastic cases of lights and cameras, and suddenly the hotel lobby filled with trolley after trolley of these things. Yeah. I said to my colleague, "Are they going in or out?" And they said out. And not long after, we rushed to the airport and to Istanbul. So there's lots more detail. And since then, every day my head's been in Ukraine, and I've just come today from a meeting in Cambridge, England, Cambridge University, with some Ukraine experts. I got off the train. That's why I'm late. I still have the band from the festival. We are in this country very, very engaged with it. But I think, as in the United States, we face this problem that the same people on the left who were soft on Tulsi Gabbard and Donald Trump are friends of Putin. There's not, the new friends of Putin.
Yes.
And maybe we can talk about that.
Yes, well, I think we should. One thing I want to say is, just because we have you here and you have such incredible knowledge, right as the war broke out, this phase of the war broke out, I interviewed, an academic, my friend Michael McKay, and he said what Putin really meant by denazify was, I'm going to do what the Red Army did to Berlin. We're going to rape your women, and we are going to see a pillaging that we have not seen in some time. And I'm sure you have thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I started writing and focusing on this crisis in March, April last year, 2021, when my contacts started to send me. I've been looking through my files. I think it's 10th of March. I started to get messages. A serious buildup is taking place that's not being discussed. This is going to happen. Something bad's going to happen. But from then until the 24th of February, even though I was sitting in a ministry in Kiev, there was always this question. Putin writes the essay, "The Ukrainians are really Russians." That's the short summary of this long rambling essay on the unity of the Ukrainians and the Russians. Then he slaps down a draft treaty saying that Eastern Europe should demilitarize, and he should get a veto on all foreign policy decisions in Europe, full stop. Okay. And then you start to get the drumbeat of ethno-nationalism. So that 2 days before the war starts, he makes this broadcast saying Ukraine is an anti-Russia. It's us, the Russians, as we should not be. And your existence as a Russian type of people who don't behave like us is an affront to us. So we're going to cancel Ukrainianness. And all the time you're thinking, is this guy serious? Because that's genocide. That's a genocidal expression. And is this guy serious that Ukraine shouldn't exist? And is he serious that he's going to demilitarize Europe? And just as with the study of historic fascism, we had to learn one thing. Take fascists at their word. If they start talking about genocide, they start talking about a final solution for the Jewish question, don't assume that this is some kind of flim-flam to mobilize votes. You have to assume they're serious about it. And on the 24th of Feb at 5 a.m., we found out that he is indeed serious. And from the Bucha massacre and all the other massacre evidence that's coming out, we're finding out that this guy, as with, I now think that we are facing a totalitarian fascist style dictatorship in Russia. I don't think that was the case 4 years ago, I thought it was an authoritarianism with right-wing nationalist politics. Now I think it's evolved. Just as Trump radicalized in office, Putin has radicalized in his hidey hole in the ground, deep in Siberia, hiding from COVID. Today is the Russian Easter, and there is a strong evidence that Putin actually had himself edited into an Easter Sunday service in the cathedral because he was too scared to go to the service. I mean, this is kind of, I think we're dealing with an utterly rational sociopath.
I 100% agree.
Wow.
There's a really important article by Robert J. Lifton that talks about how Putin appears to have changed into a totalist ideology, right? As exactly to your point, as opposed to authoritarian, meaning that anything that he believes, he thinks is justified, including genocide, including things like that. The reason it came up for me was in the context of nukes.
Yeah.
Right. Like, as you said, believe them. If he tells you something, believe him. And he's been telling us repeatedly over the last several weeks that nukes are on the table for him if he gets backed into a corner and doesn't get what he wants.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that?
Well, look, what we have to start from, so many people, quite rightly, are terrified that the possibility that this will escalate into a nuclear war. We'll come to how it might do so. And there is a mindset then, and I total sympathy for why people might have this mindset, that they then say, in order to avoid that, let's agree to anything he wants. Right. And that is a logical conclusion, because we knew that our great-grandparents and grandparents in Central Europe were faced with that. Hitler says he wants something and he'll invade if he doesn't get it, so just give it to him. We may historically look back at those people as cowards, but we can now understand how terrifying they must have been. Okay, it is in the Russian military doctrine, they exercise for this, to escalate to de-escalate. So when they've got what they want, or when they're at a point where they're losing what they want, in the doctrine, in Putin's doctrine, introduced by him in 2002, they drop either tactical nuke, either for a military reason to gain some, a space, a grid square on the battlefield that's now free of people, or for a symbolic reason. And then they say to the West, well, what are you going to do? Now, Western military kind of West Point type thinking, would say you drop one back, remembering that Putin hasn't attacked NATO, he's attacked Ukraine. What were the options? The obvious option would be somewhere in Syria that has a lot of Russian troops, okay? That is not a good option. What are the other options? Give in, that's an option. Another option that I've heard increasingly coming out of some circles in Washington, some of them neocon, some of them perfectly liberal, is that you do not escalate nuclear, and you certainly do not seek any kind of strategic nuclear escalation. But at that point, it's a no-win situation for Putin, because you then have legal justification, responsibility to protect on the UN convention to go in. I don't want NATO to go into Russia, but I also do not want a world in which Vladimir Putin can get anything he wants by dropping a kind of low wattage, nuclear bomb on a city. Right. So there's no good options. And our generation has to face that we've created this situation by not facing down people like Trump, people like Le Pen, people like Putin. There's no good options. So then you have to think about what are the least worst options. To me, one would be right now the kind of organized volunteer force that doesn't exist at the moment. So, let's remember when the volunteers of the International Brigade in the Spanish Civil War went to Spain, they went with, to be honest, crap Russian rifles and not much else. When Hitler and Mussolini sent their volunteers to Spain, there were regiments of the German and Italian armies rebadged as Spanish army with their own equipment. If Putin, wants to play silly games, then one of the silly prizes he's going to get is something like that, I think, because as we all know, it's very much more obvious to us here in Europe that if he gets his way in Ukraine, it won't stop. I mean, I don't want to dominate the discussion here, but
no, we want you to. This is about your knowledge.
I liaise with activists in the European left who are not from the far left, but from the quite moderate Party of European Socialists, which is all our social democratic parties. So Labour, the Spanish PSOE. Okay, they're not radicals. They have comrades inside Ukraine, and they've brought out some of the leaders. They've created networks of support. I won't talk about the detail, but they're doing really good work. All of the young people who are doing that organizing in, say, Poland, Latvia, Moldova, Romania, you don't get into those networks now unless you are operating in an underground SOP. So everybody's using, they're using Proton Mail, they're using Signal, they're using Notio, I think it's called. Everything's end-to-end encrypted, clean cell phones, throwaway laptops. This is not the left underground. This is the bloody moderate underground. Jesus. Getting ready for what comes next. So yeah, I don't know, Jim. What do you and the others on the call? You know, what is the feeling in your side of the world about what happens if he does do this?
If he drops a nuke, I don't know. I don't know, honestly. It scares the shit out of me that we're not. The good news, I think, is that we're taking it seriously. The director of the CIA came on television and said, "Hey, take this guy seriously," when he's talks about nuclear weapons. So to the extent that, you know, our government appears to be understanding that this is an information war and is actively front running his plans. It feels like at a minimum it would be pretty hard for him to run some sort of surprise attack at this point.
I agree.
I had a question.
I think that's the good news. I think High Five was raising his hand for a long time.
You talk about these volunteer groups, and that's one of the things I'm wondering right now is why aren't we staging volunteer troops in Estonia and Finland and Latvia and at this point, given the amount of war crimes that Russia has been shown to have committed, and not to mention the ones they're covering up with their mobile crematoriums and Wagner, who is not Russian military, except we all know they are. Why aren't we sending troops into Russia? I mean, Ukraine is struck on Russian ground. Ukraine needs to drive for Moscow.
I think that would be unnecessary and provocative. The defeat that can be inflicted on Vladimir Putin can probably be defeated in the way that NATO are now trying to do, which is to arm the Ukrainians with enough modern weaponry that they can blunt this attack, make it very, very unfortunately bloody for the poor conscripts who are going to be doing it in the Donbass, and yet again bring him to an operational pause where he hasn't achieved anything. The difference, I mean, just in terms of pure technology, this time we're now seeing we're seeing US supplied howitzers, 155 millimeter howitzers, fine. But what's going with them is targeting radar of the kind that's going to be, we see, those of us who are watching this all the time on this relentless kind of wearying Telegram channel kind of world where you're watching warfare at a distance. What we're seeing is the ability, the capability to quite seriously defeat that. So I think it would be totally counterproductive. You ask, why aren't we even assembling? Why aren't the West doing it? Because there is not a lot of political will to do it with conventional forces, even to get the conventional forces and the social resilience mobilized to deter Putin in the future.
Okay, and you mentioned earlier Le Pen. Right, we talked about Le Pen and how Le Pen has been accused of taking Russian money. Recently, the foreign minister of Austria came out and said, "Oh no, Ukraine shouldn't join the EU." And we know that their former prime minister Scholz is corrupt. We've seen the same problem in Bulgaria with Borisov. We saw it in Italy with Salvini. I mean, how do people not recognize that Russia has been systemically undermining democracy, not just in Europe, but in the United States?
Well, let's take it case by case. Le Pen, for certain, took money from Russia. She owes Russian money, and it came out today that she's having to involuntarily repay a loan because the lender is now subject to sanctions. Okay, the rest is as you say it. The Austrian foreign ministry has been described by even NATO sort of allies. Well, it's not in NATO, but it's been described by Western sources as a kind of branch office of the Kremlin. Who owns the means of production of truth? It's in my country, it's oligarchs like Rupert Murdoch or Alexander Lebedev, who son of an ex KGB agent. Who is? Why don't we know? Why did it only come out just this week that one of Boris Johnson's main donors is not only Russian, not only the wife of an oligarch, but has been provenly part of the network of companies that oligarch has used because nobody investigated it. Okay? That's not the one problem. And then on the other side of the problem, our part of the problem is that parts of the left don't want to talk about that. We've got parts of the left that say Le Pen, she's right to raise the issues she raises. There are parts of the left that are Islamophobic. And
it's the same here with Bernie, right?
Yeah,
it was the same thing.
That's right.
By the way, let me just correct one thing. Scholz was not the corrupt prime minister. The German president, who was, let's put it this way, very pro-Russian and took a lot of money from Russia, was Gerhard Schröder. And the current German president, which is a symbolic post, is Steinmeier, and he was banned from Ukraine just to that last month because they say you're a patsy, basically, of the same operation. So
you're right. I'm sorry. I was thinking of Kurtz, Sebastian Kurtz.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, Kurtz.
Yes.
Oh my God, Kurtz.
Yes.
Yeah, another one. It's the Putin far right axis, unfortunately bolstered by certain parts of the left that want to use the same narratives and have come out far. If you look at what's happened with Greenwald, with Grey Zone, Aaron Mate, they've got far more.
Tybee.
Yeah.
It's Oliver Stone as well. I mean, he's now doing the interview rounds of the right wing podcasters.
That's right.
Look, it's a very old school Soviet KGB tactic. It's a third position, right? You create the third position, which is neither right or left,
right?
And it's the worst form of fascism. It's
and
the
Paul,
most.
Let me circle back. I had a question that I wanted to, or an idea, a thought to sort of bounce off of you. And what that is I wonder if there's just a collective forfeiture of the truth that you're talking about. What I mean by that is there doesn't seem to be any statesman, no one, standing up and giving a speech or a talk or inspired language or oratory that really gets people looking in one direction. It seems we've forfeited that for intelligence or data. And I wonder if that's just a function of our time in the world, or if we're just all exhausted from the political, bludgeoning that we've had for the past 8 years. But I don't know if I'm being nostalgic, or there seems to be a very
question,
a very intense time where you would consider, you would assume, or you would hope that there would be a voice or an idea that would emerge from someone, as a statesman. Where are our statesmen, I guess, is the question.
Well, yeah, I mean, the sad thing to say is that one of the most clear statesman-like or statesperson-like interventions has been from Volodymyr Zelensky himself.
That's
and
right.
A lot of it is acted. A lot of it is advised by his advisors. I was speaking today to a Ukrainian contact who said to me, basically, whenever Zelensky speaks, he uses the equivalent of him and her. He says are male and female soldiers, or he always uses the word form that includes women. And it's incredibly left field thing to do in Ukraine even now, but he does it. So that's one statesperson, let's say. I think Annalena Baerbock from the German foreign minister, the Green politician, has been brilliant. I think Finland's Prime Minister, Sanna Marin, 35-year-old social democrat, backed by the radical left, Lee Anderson, has been brilliant. So the social democratic Prime Minister of Sweden, again female, leftish. Why have they been so good? Because they're people with skin in the game.
That's right.
The German Greens know that now is the time to divest of all fossil fuel energy, and the German Greens it became a kind of place where people who didn't want to be part of the corrupt system, and the German governance system is corrupt in a different way to America or Britain. It's just influence, and the influence Russia was using. The Greens were a kind of refuge from that, and it turns out that some smart people have turned up leading them. I have to say that from the left, it's been disappointing.
Yes.
And part of it is this relentless pressure that is on all of us, on all left politicians, from what I call neo-Stalinism, from that world, you know it in the USA, from the DSA International Committee, in which Putin can do no wrong. What has happened there? So I was looking, I always check, because I always hope this will one day change. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, 12.6 million followers on Twitter. I would really hope that maybe once a week she would have said something positive and hopeful about fighting Putin in Ukraine, but it's not there.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's because of any personal sympathy she may have. The fact is, in her ear constantly are those voices, and they're not just the kind of green wall type voices or the DSA National Committee voices. They are voices of oppressed people, Black and Hispanic people who have drunk the Kool-Aid of this is not our war. It's the same as Muhammad Ali once said about the Viet Cong. No one from Russia ever harmed us. The American imperialist state and its police force, that is our problem. I can totally understand it, but you would want leadership because
it seems
FDR. Let's finish it.
That's
FDR
right.
overcame that.
That's
FDR
right.
Overcame American isolationism.
He sure
He
did.
brought sections of the oppressed people with him precisely for that reason.
Yeah, there's a point. There's a point at which this political calculus gets too esoteric for anybody, and so you have individuals, or politicians, or statesmen fighting over these decimal places of small insignificant values. Everything gets fractured. We're getting close to that state now, but I like that point about AOC particularly because that is a voice that she's well spoken and
she's a great leader. She's a great leader. I just want her to come onto the page of where maybe European social democracy is.
That's right.
It's now clear to us that this is an existential fight. It's a systemic conflict, and we're going to have to just live. The Russian ideologues. You know what they call the enemy? What do they call us? The system, the West. They call it LGBT capitalism.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we have 1 minute left with you, and I have a question, and this was incredible as always. There's a war where the West is at war and has been at some time, and maybe it's undeclared, but we have had asymmetrical warfare, and we have no leadership as we've just established on the level that can mobilize and unite people. So how can we help? How do we fight back? Like, how do we, with our platform here, your knowledge here, what do we do to actually fight back in a meaningful way? Because everything gets drowned out by distraction after distraction, confusion, information silos. I'm in the trenches, political trenches every day, and I have learned that people don't know there's an information war, and they barely fucking know that there's a war in Ukraine.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is what I always say on the almost nightly rallies that we have here in support of the Ukrainian people. We saw early in the battle for Kiev, the Ukrainian government encouraging people to make Molotov cocktails. And I always say the Molotov cocktail is the longest range weapon in warfare. because one thrown in Kiev another one can be thrown in Minsk, the capital of Belarus, and another one can be thrown in Moscow. The working class can throw Molotovs anywhere, and that's what ultimately they're afraid of. The person who came close to intimating this, weirdly, was Joe Biden. When Biden went to Warsaw and said basically, we cannot allow Putin to remain in charge. That was Biden, the trade unionist,
Yes.
The same as what he said about Amazon and then walked it back. It's Biden. Biden's instinct is right here. Now, we as the left have, something more powerful than a nuke, and that is a workers' and people's uprising. And I think that Belarus, the weak link of the Russian power system, has had an uprising, and it could quite easily have another one. If Putin loses, there could be then the masses. Okay, the leadership of the Russian anti-Putin is pretty nationalist, not particularly progressive, but they're in jail, so they kind of want a little bit more rule of law. And then here, what can we do? Here in Europe, we've just been doing really practical things. Yes, there's an information war, but you can pre-buttle. You understand what they're going to say, so you construct the truth narrative in advance to anticipate that. You name the influence. You name what is happening. I'm so sick of this. You go to a meeting, often online, by one of these groups that claims to be against the Russian invasion, but what they really want to do is, this is what's coming to you and to us. Stop the arms supply. This is the next campaign of the Putin proxies against the arms supply. And what you want to say to them is, Putin spends 70 billion a year influencing the rest of the world through hybrid warfare, through influence campaigns. What are you doing to make sure that none of that money is at work in your operation? That's what I would say to those left groups in America, to the Stop the War campaign here in Britain. Okay, let's accept that you really like Putin, or you think Ukraine is an illegitimate state, and you're against NATO because you think it's the biggest problem in the world. What are you doing to make sure you're not purveying disinformation? And what are you doing to make sure that you're not actually tools of a Russian information operation? And the answer is always, that's a rude question. It's an impertinent question. They don't want to answer it. And that's where
that's a very important question.
Yes,
absolutely.
That's the question.
I mean, once you start answering it, it's not hard to trace the networks of influence back to where they come from, which in my estimation is both Beijing and Moscow. We're not primarily facing a kind of Moscow information op on this issue. What we're facing, for example, in the global south is an operation that says, form a non-aligned movement like the Bandung Declaration in the 50s that is neither NATO nor Russia, and it embodies the values of global South capitalism, which are non-democratic, because who needs democracy here in the global South? And by the way, here is big Uncle Xi Jinping might be able to be the patron saint of this non-aligned movement. That is happening. In fact, if your listeners and viewers haven't heard of it, I would ask them in the next 4 weeks, listen out for it, because it's coming.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.
Oh my God, Paul, please
France,
come back.
talk about Britain, but thank you for having me.
One line on France and one line on Britain. Plant a seed, please, before you disappear.
Yeah, it's good. I think Macron's going to win. By the time this goes out, maybe Macron will have won. It's a tragedy that parts of the left won't vote for him tactically. I think, however, the strength of the left, Mélenchon, I'm no fan of Mélenchon. Mélenchon is another Bernie with some of the same weaknesses.
Yeah.
But he scored so highly because there is a market for a left social justice, anti-imperialist cause, and it's entirely possible that in the coming assembly elections in June, that the left could mount a challenge, provided this guy Mélenchon is prepared to allow some of the more diverse left voices.
Okay.
Otherwise, that's my one line on France. I'd be very surprised if Le Pen gets within, say, 8 to 10 points of Macron.
Okay.
Final point on Britain. We have a great, fantastic, wide open governmental crisis opening up here, largely because the Prime Minister is the first Prime Minister in history to be fined for breaking the law. He broke several COVID lockdown rules by having parties. The word on the street is that maybe at one of these parties some white powder was knocking around, and if that is proven to be true, then it's goodbye to him. And simply because he owns the premises that the parties were on, and it's likely. I think it's 50-50 that we'll get a change of leadership in the ruling Conservative Party. So a new face, an old problem, neoliberalism. But crisis in the elite is never a bad thing to end on.
And that's not a bad point to end on either. Paul Mason, thank you so much. Everybody buy his book, How to Stop Fascism, and all his other books. Follow him on Twitter at Paul Mason News. Oh, we are so grateful you spent some time with us today.
Have a great rest of the day. Cheers.
So, I can't believe we just had the blessing of Paul Mason come on a second time. We are some lucky motherfuckers, and so are our viewers. And now, Sean, do you have a digital dissent for us?
Yeah, it's just this. I like this judge so much. It's just his. This is his reaction.
Taylor Greene judge.
This is his reaction to Marjorie Taylor Greene's statements about, her history.
There's a lot of. There was a big process. There was a big build up there before the Revolutionary War. The whole purpose was not to use guns for violence.
What did you mean?
It's the narrative that you're trying to push here.
What did you mean when you said that?
The whole purpose was not to use. The whole purpose was not to use. The whole purpose was not to use guns for violence.
What did you mean?
It's the narrative that you're trying to push here.
What did you mean when you said that?
It's the eyebrows at the end. Really, okay, then. You're crazy.
I like that guy.
We needed that laugh. We've covered some serious terrain on this show this episode, but we absolutely needed that laugh. That was amazing.
Man. So funny. All right, guys. We'll see you later this week. I'm tired.
We just had the most killerest episode again. All right. Thank you guys so much.
Later. Bye. Bye-bye.